Hello everyone, welcome to assignment 5, the guideline, and today's focus is going to be on logical functions. So last time was all about statistical functions, so for example, count if, average if, sum if, etc. This time's focus is going to be more on the ifs, like it alone, logical functions, if yes or no, 1 or 0, true or false. It's going to be on that, but we still might need the statistical functions at some point. So let's dive right into it with the first exercise on logical functions. I think it's there are two exercises. Anyway, so step 1, or part 1, insert in the cell of 4 the needed function to display yes when the price received is different from 0 and no otherwise. So we'll say yes if the received price is different from 0. Then we'll copy it to the rest of the functions. Okay, so right here in the sold, we'll write equals if. So today's all about if functions. We'll open this and we'll give it the logical test. We'll tell it what we want it to do when it's true. We'll tell it what we want it to do when it's false. The logical test, that is. So in this example, they're saying I want the price received to be not 0. So not means the difference. So it's the symbol less than and greater than. So H4 has to be different from 0. If it is different from 0, we'll say yes. Otherwise, we'll say no. So similar to the other functions that we've learned so far. So if this is true, I'll do yes. Otherwise, I'll say no. Type that in and double click here to autofill. And as always, we can compare them with the screenshot to make sure our answer is fine. So like 4 yeses, then no, no, etc. 4 yeses, then no, no, etc. Now, this isn't the only way to solve it. So with a lot of these functions, it's not just about having a unique solution. There could be a lot of different solutions. So remember, they said when it's different from 0, we'll say yes. When it is 0, we'll say no. So another way we could have solved this is like this. Okay, I'll test if it's equal to 0. If it is equal to 0, I'll say no. So like it was not sold. Otherwise, I'll say yes. So like we flipped the true or false statements because we changed the condition. But as you can see, the answers are still all the same. So a lot of ways we can solve stuff. Part 2. Insert in cell J4 and as before, we'll copy it. So usually with these questions, we want to copy all the way down. And another thing I usually notice is some students like here, instead of saying H4, for some reason, you'd give it the entire range and compare that. Now, so in this scenario, I'm getting an error. Sometimes you might not get an error, which might be something to look at. So sometimes you put a range and you compare it to 0. Sometimes it might work. Luckily, I'm getting an error, so it's telling me that what I'm doing is wrong. But yeah, in the scenario, I only want to compare H4 with the price received. I know we want to do it for the whole thing, but once you copy, it starts going down with you. So now it's H6, H7, etc. So this value is for this row. Each row is its own unique entity or its own entry record. Anyway, back to part 2, insert in cell J4 and then copy it in the same column the needed function to display the following. Sold out, when the quantity sold is the same as the original, available. Partially sold, if it's above 0, not sold, otherwise. So serve like 3 scenarios. So for this, let's start with the first one. When it's sold out, the quantity is the same as the original, available. Makes sense, right? Like, hey, how much have you sold in here? I4 is equal to the quantity available. That means you're sold out. So 2 ways we could solve this. We can either solve it with the if or with the ifs. Let's first do it using the if statement. So my test is as follows. I'm checking if the quantity available is equal to the quantity sold. Whoops. It's equal to the quantity sold. If this is true, I'll say sold out, like it's entirely sold. Otherwise, if it's false, I have 2 options. It can either be partially sold or it could be not sold. So how can I figure that out, right? Like if you focus, there's a logical test, value of true, value of false. If it's false, so that means it's not sold out. It could either be not sold, or partially. So I can't write right away the answer. I have to do now another condition. So in the false of this first if statement, I'm doing a whole other if statement. And here I'm checking, well, is the quantity sold, so is the I4 at least bigger than 0? That would mean it's partially sold. And if this one is false, I'll say not sold. So very important. I have nested if statements here. So in this condition for the first if it's true, I'm sold out. If it's false, then I'm doing a whole other if statement. So this other if statement will only apply, will only happen when this first condition is false. Okay, so they're not equal. Well, then I'm checking. Is it bigger than 0? That means you're partially sold. Notice how for the last condition, I didn't need to check for anything. Right away, I said not sold. Why? Well, when do you reach the not sold? The first condition was wrong, so they're not equal. Okay, then I'm checking this. It's not bigger than 0. So if they're not equal and it's not bigger than 0, the only thing left for it is to be equal 0. So that means not sold out. I could have checked if it's equal to 0, but no, not necessary. Like the quantity sold of something, it has to be either 0 or strictly positive. We press enter, we double click, so it fills the whole thing. And as always, we can compare here. But as I said, this is not the only way to do it. There's another way. So I can enter here another column. I'll call it sales status version 2. In this scenario, I'll use the if statement, the ifs instead, or like over there, ifs function. In this scenario, or in this function, you give it a condition, then what do you do if it's true? Condition, what do you do if it's true? And you keep going. So I'll say, okay, is I4 equal to 0? If that's true, is it equal to C4? If that's true, so you sold everything, sold out. Now you write the other logical test and you're checking if it's true. So the other condition would be, well, so that means if I reach here, if I'm testing this logical test, that means the first one was wrong. So I'm not totally sold out. Well, at least did I sell anything? So am I bigger than 0? If yes, I'll say partially sold. And then again, if I reach this third logical test, that means this was wrong and this was wrong. So I can check if I equal 0 and then say, well, if I am, we'll write not sold. I could do that. Let us just type in enter and double click to autofill. You'll notice all the answers are the same. So, but again, like before, once you reach here, of course you're going to be equal to 0. Like you don't even need to check. You could just write true. So true means, like, remember, these are all conditions, right? They are either true or false. So the value that we return when you're testing, is this bigger than 0? It's either going to be true or false. If you write true right away, that means it's like you wrote a condition that's always true because it's literally true. So again, it'll also work. Part 3, which is, okay, so part 3 is really interesting. The revised price should give a 25% discount in the following conditions. Unsold item whose starting price is above 10, or remaining quantity is more than 4. If you read this carefully, there are 3 conditions. Condition 1 is the item is unsold. Condition 2 is starting price is above 10. And the third condition is remaining quantity is bigger than 4. However, they're saying unsold item whose starting price is above 10. So it's as if they want both of these conditions to be true at the same time, which means I might need to use and. Like I'm saying, this and this have to be true. Or the third condition is true. You get it? So this and this, or the third one. Now, lots of ways we could solve this. I'll solve it like this. So first I'll do and for condition 1 with condition 2, because I want them to be true at the same time. So this or this, this and this have to be true at the same time, or this whole thing that we just wrote, or the other condition, which is checking if the quantity is bigger than 4. Cool. This whole thing is your condition. You're checking either condition 1 and 2 are true at the same time, or condition 3 is true. And this whole thing is going to be in your if statement. So you're testing this condition. If it's true, you'll give the 25% discount. So we'll see how we'll do that. It's not just writing 25%. Otherwise, you'll leave the price as it is. So let's do that. Going here, equals if. So the first logical test, or outside, as you saw, it's going to be an or between two things. The first thing happens to be an and I'm checking, well, is it sold? So I'll check if this is yes. And is the starting price bigger than 10? I close the brackets of the and because that's it. These two conditions have to be true. I wrote a comma in between. Now I'll write a comma for the or. So remember, this whole and is like your first big condition, which is made up of two conditions, 1 and 2. Or the third condition, which is the quantity remaining has to be bigger than 4. Now I don't have a column for quantity remaining. I only have a column for quantity sold and quantity available. But think about it. If I subtract the quantity available, which is C4, from the quantity remaining, the quantity sold, which is I4, I'm left with the quantity remaining, and I can check that if it's bigger than 4. I'll repeat. C4 is how much you had in total. I4 is how much you sold. If you subtract them, you get the remaining, and you have to check if that's bigger than 4. All of that is in your or statement. All of this is your condition. Again, this and is checking if I'm unsold and my starting price is bigger than 10, or if the quantity remaining is bigger than 4. Finally, I'll put the comma for the if statement. So now I'll write what I want when it's true. So what I want is a bumping or removing from the price received or from the starting price, I want to remove 25%. So the starting price is G4. Two ways I could do this. I can either subtract from it G4 times 0.25 or times 25%, same thing. I could do that, but this is equivalent to multiplying either G4 by 75% or 0.75. Think about it, like G4 minus 0.25 times G4. So like 1 minus 0.25, you're left with 0.75. That's if it's true. If it's false, I'll just say G4. Type enter here and double click. Let's see, 3060, 37.5. 4,000. Okay, so it seems like I made a mistake for the first one. What went wrong? I'm checking if, oh, my bad. It wasn't if it is so, if it, I think the condition was unsold, right? Yeah, unsold item. So I was checking for yes when I should have been checking for no here. Okay, so 4,080, 37.5, or 80, 37.5, 10,000, etc. It looks good. And again, this is not the only way we could have done this. Like I could come up with maybe 3 or 4 more other ways we could have done it. Like we could have used ifs somehow. I could have used the if statement in another way. There's plenty of ways we could have solved this. But the way that I did solve it, it seems the most it seems like here we had the conditions in English and we simply translated them here almost the same, right? Like if you try to read this, it's as if you're saying, oh, I want an unsold item whose starting price is bigger than 10, or its quantity available is bigger than 4. And again, it's very similar the way that it's written. Okay, cool. I think this was all of exercise 1. Great. So it wasn't a particularly long lab. Now we're left with 4 more questions. Very important is do be careful with the commas. So far, every comma we've used was a separator for arguments. So this comma here is separating what? This first condition for the and this second condition for the and. Whereas this comma was separating the arguments of the or, which is this big condition for the or and this second condition for the or. This comma is separating your condition from the if statement, from what do you do if it's true, from what do you do if it's false. I don't know if you need it, if I explained this, but like the G4, simply if your conditions are wrong, so you're not going to do a discount, you just write G4 as it is. Okay. Were there at least 1,000 items displayed in the auction? So exercise 2 is just solving these 4 problems so we can focus on the Excel. Now, the difference from these questions and before we were copying, right? So like when you did a condition, usually you only had to worry about a single record. Whereas here, we're going to give it a whole rows probably, or whole columns. So were there at least 1,000 items sold? Well, one quick way before I even write the function, I'll sum how many items I do have. So from the quantity available, I shouldn't count. If I count, I'll get the unique items. Here they're checking if everything that's being sold. So 573, which means no. Now, the wrong way to solve this, if you notice in this screenshot of the solution, they say no, and they just list how many items you do have. The wrong way to solve this would be to assume that it's always going to be no. So right away, like I write here, no, comma, and the sum. So, and for the concatenation, and I'll say items are available. This is the wrong way to solve it because I'm assuming it's always no. I should check if I have 1,000 items. If I don't, I'll say this. And just an important remark, this comma is actually a text comma. It's not a separator, right? So when it's between quotations, it's just text. Like if I write more commas or I type gibberish, it'll appear. Because it's between quotation, it's just text. Very important to differentiate between a regular comma and a text comma. So anyway, remember, this should ideally be what I say if I don't have 1,000 items. So I'll put this on the side just for a moment. Now I'll write the actual checking. Equals if. I want to see if I have at least 1,000 items. So sum of the quantity available, is that bigger than 1,000? Now they're saying at least 1,000, so I should say greater than or equal. It won't make a difference if you don't put an or equal because we have 573. But when they say at least, that means if you have 1,000, it should say yes. If you didn't put the or equal, it means you're checking if it's strictly greater than 1,000. But they're saying at least 1,000. If somebody tells you, hey, do you have at least 5 something, and you do have 5, you should say yes. This would be checking if I have at least 1,001. Again, if you said or equal, not a big deal, but you should know the difference. It is actually a big deal, but like if you put the greater than and everyone was fine, I'd say like you're 95% correct. Okay. So what do I do if it's true? Well, I'll say yes. What do I do if it's false? I'll say everything I wrote right here. So I'll say no, comma. And very important, this comma is separating my arguments. This comma is just a text comma. So no, and sum C4 till C43. And I have this many items available. So this is your condition. Do I have at least 1,000? I should have an or equal. If yes, I'll say yes. If no, I'll tell them, well, how much do I have left? Press enter, we'll get the answer. And why is this cool? Because if for some reason you got some more stocks, so I'll change this one to like 560. Okay, now when I type enter, the quantity available changed. So now it's going to say yes. Why? I added like 550 items. So now it's going to be more. Like actually what we could do, so for here it might be fine. Notice what I'm doing. I'm going to remove the concatenation of the sum. I'll add a comma after the yes too. So what am I going to do here? I'll check if it's 1,000 and I'm only going to say yes or no. Outside the if statement, I'll concatenate how many items I do have. That way, if you're saying yes or if you're saying no, you're always going to show me the sum. So I'll type enter. You'll notice now it's saying yes, 1,132 items are available. Now if I change this back, this 560 back to a 1, no 573 items are available. You see why it's important to do the check and not just write right away no sum, because we want it to be dynamic. The items could change. Like this could be an actual Excel in a store and you got new items and you're checking if you, for some reason, you want to check if you have at least 1,000. And actually, let's do something interesting. Let me add, see how much we need. Like I'll add 470. So 438. 428. Notice exactly 1,000 now. I'm saying, yeah, we're asking, do I have at least 1,000? Yes, I have 1,000. Exactly. If I did not put the or equal, it would have said no, even though it should say yes, I do have at least 1,000. So that's why having the or equal here is very, very important. Maybe it's more than 90. Maybe it's like 75% correct. Your answer would be if you didn't put the or equal. Change this back to 1. Okay. Were there more computers or supplies sold? Oh, sorry, one more thing. I did notice that some people did put the greater than 1,000 right here instead of outside. Now, I'm not sure if this will be acceptable or if this is wrong for some reason. Let's see if I put the greater than 500. It should say yes, but it's saying no. So I put the greater than 500 inside the parameters. It's saying no. Like it didn't understand what I was writing here. Okay, so it's very important. Like sum only takes a range. Like why are you putting the greater than 500 inside of it? It's outside here. Now it'll tell me yes because I'm only checking if I'm bigger than 500. So really important. Like sometimes you might write a condition wrong and like it's checking the answer. It's telling you the answer is correct, but the way that you wrote it is wrong. Okay? So right now, if I move this greater than 1,000 inside, I'm saying no. It seems like my answer is correct, but again, it's not really correct because as you saw before, when I was checking for 500, it still said no. That's because this should be outside. Like you close the bracket of these sum functions and then you compare the answer. So this gets you some number. You're checking if it's bigger than 500. Yes, it is. Or you check if it's bigger than 1,000. No, it's not. Part 2. Were there more computers or more supplies sold? Okay. So you notice what I'm saying at the beginning when we said, oh, we might still use some statistical functions. Like here we used sum. Here we're going to be using sum if along with our if statement. Why? Because I want to sum the items that were sold if they were a computer, and I want to sum them if they were supplies, and then I want to compare them in one big if statement. To make it easier on myself, usually I like to start small. So maybe sum if, I'll just check how many computers I have. So sum if, we have to give it the range. So for the type, actually I think it might, yeah, for the type, not the category. So the type, are you a computer? If yes, I'll sum how many of you were sold. So quantity sold, it's 104. And real quickly, instead of computer, I could change it to supplies 30. So like now I have an idea of all, like I sold more computers. And if we check the screenshot, indeed we did. Okay, so now instead of this, I'll get this back to a computer. I'm checking now if this sum is bigger than the sum when it was supplies. So notice my condition. I'm summing how many computers were sold. Then I'm checking if it's bigger than how many supplies were sold. All the commas are very important. Like, don't put, for example, a comma here. That would be wrong because your condition isn't over yet. Your condition is checking if this is bigger than this. Now I'll put a comma. What do I do if it's true? Well, I'll just say more computers were sold, comma, more supplies were sold. Then I'll close the bracket of the whole if function. If I type enter, more computers were sold. But again, if for some reason supplies, where are you? Here, for some reason, if supplies sold a whole bunch of new stuff, I would get more supplies were sold. And actually, very important here that we're doing sum and not count. If you wrote count if instead of sum if, you would simply be counting how many different computers you have, which is completely different than summing how many computers you sold. If you had put it as count, it was always going to say more computers were sold because you have more computer items. So let me maybe show you real quick what I'm saying. If this was countf, so I don't need now a sum range. If this was countf as well, don't need this sum range now anymore. Okay, it says more computers were sold. I think my answer is correct. But again, if I now go to the supplies here, and I say 999, it still says more computers were sold. Why? Because I'm checking if it's count. So I'm checking how many unique items of computers I have, how many unique supplies I have, instead of the summing, where there are more computers sold, as in more in total. Control Z to undo the 999, Control Z to undo the what if. Now it's back to sum. Again, supplies now, if I change the number, oh, more supplies were sold. That's the difference. Is the average price received above 6,000? Is the average price car received above 6,000? Well, again, I'll do the same thing. Like, first, check your condition. Average if. Of course, I need this. This is going to be my condition. So it has to be inside the condition of an if statement or an if function. But right away, I'll write the condition on its own. So average if type car. So I'm only doing now the average. If it's car, I get 0. That's because it's the average of price received. So I have to add a comma and put here price received. So 6446, which makes me feel, yes, it's going to be bigger than 6,000. So that's a good way of starting. Like, oh, my condition is true. So if I compare it, I should get a yes, or should get a true. But some people were getting it wrong. That's because you didn't. Some people just wrote average and they gave it the range without doing it for car. The average of all the price received items is 2,000, which is different than the average of car. So very important. If you only did the average for everything, you would have gotten a different number, 2,000, which is less than 6,000. Okay, so now this is my condition, and I want to check if it's bigger than 6,000. True. So when you just write a condition, you'll get either true or false. But this whole condition has to be inside my if statement. Why? I don't want the average. I don't want the average of car. I'm checking if the average of car is bigger than 6,000. This whole thing is your condition. If yes, you'll say yes. Otherwise, you'll say no. Like, that's all the screenshot wanted, yeah, right? Yeah, only a yes or no question. But we could have concatenated what it was. So we could have said the is like a comma, the average is, and then I concatenate it with this part. Like, whether I say yes or no, whether yes or no. Like at the end, I always concatenate what it was. They're not asking for that, but we could have done that. So this part was maybe relatively easier from the previous one. Part 4. Is there an item in the auction with starting price less than $10? If yes, what is the cheapest starting price? Is there an item in the auction with a starting price less than 10? Okay, now this is really important. Some might solve it like this. They'll get the starting price range, and they're checking if it's less than 10. I'll just say yes or no for now. I get this spell error. So this is actually good that I'm getting this error. So in the lab, you were actually not getting this error. And why? So for some people, you might write this and right away it'll tell you yes or no. But it's wrong to do this. Again, you can't compare a range with a number. Like if you actually do this, what you're doing is you're comparing maybe 4,000 with 10. If you do get an error. So let me see if I can ignore it. I'll say ignore the error. Okay, nothing happened. It didn't give me a yes or no. But yeah, you don't want to give it a range. Instead, think, what are ways we could do to check if something is less than 10? Like they're telling you, do you have an item that's less than 10? Well, 2 ways we could solve this. First, the easier way. They're both, there's not one is not easier than the other, but one is maybe easier to understand. Instead of checking the range, which is wrong, I'll get the minimum value in my range. So min of starting price. Okay, let me remove everything and just get the minimum. The minimum is 1. Like they're asking you, do you have an item that's less than 10? If you get the minimum and it happens to be less than 10, then that means yes. Of course I have something less than 10. My minimum is less than 10. So of course I have some item that's less than 10. But again, I don't want the minimum. I want to check if the minimum is less than 10. So if min is less than 10, I'll say yes. And they're saying, if it's yes, what is the cheapest item? Well, it's minimum. Otherwise, I'll say yes, 1. Actually, let me say yes. And the cheapest item is, notice how I only got 1. That's because, again, if you remember from last time, when you're getting something, it's only getting the value. It's not getting the type. So it's not getting the currency. It's not getting the dollar. That's okay. I can add it right here. Yes, the cheapest item is $, and then the function will get me 1. And like it looks neat, $1. Cool. Like here as well, I could have said the average is $6,400. But an important thing I want to mention here. So otherwise, I'm saying no. Let me see if I have something less than 0. Of course, you won't have something that costs less than 0. But I'm purposely writing a wrong condition because now when I press enter, I'll get the no. Like your cheapest was 1. But very important, you'll notice like in this part and in this part, I put the concatenation at the very end because I always wanted it to show up whether it was yes or no, whether it was true or false. In this scenario, I don't want to do that. They only, if you read it, if yes, what is the cheapest starting price? They're asking only if I do have something less than 10, tell me what is the cheapest price. Now, it might be okay if you concatenate it outside, but that's not what they're saying. They're telling you, hey, only if it's yes, tell me what it is. Like it could have been something else. If no, get me the max. Right? So now it's different. Like, hey, if no, I'll concatenate that then with the max. Again, they're not asking us to do that, but you can see what I'm saying. Like in this scenario, they're asking for something specific if it's yes. So I'll only tell them if it's yes, because the function could have been modified. And if no, you should get me the maximum. So now if I change this back to the 0 condition, it's going to be false. So no, and I'm getting the max, 16,500. Okay. So that's one way of solving it. Another way of solving it could have been as follows. The condition, instead of min, I could have counted. So first let me write the solution, then we'll explain it. So count if this time. Count how many items you have less than 10. So again, without the if statement, let me count. Count if starting price. I want that inside actually. So let me write it from scratch. Count if G3 till G34, right? 44, 43. Okay. And started from G4. Count if I'm less than 10. A reminder, like when we're doing the count if, we write, or the average if, we write like the condition usually between quotations. But with if, we were doing it right away, like if something's less than 10, or like you'll notice here, with the minimum, right away we wrote less than 10. We didn't write less than 10 between quotations. That's just something, it's done in Excel, okay? Like when you're using logical if statements, you just write the condition right away. Like I would have only written here quotations if I was comparing it with text. Like if I, for some reason, I was checking is some name equal to some random name, right? In this scenario, you'd write the equal outside and you'd write the text between quotations. This is just syntax, like this is how it's done. But back to here. Count if my range is less than 10. I'm counting how many prices are less than 10. I get 5. So this is as if it's asking how many items are less than 10. Okay, this is answering the question, how many are less than 10? Okay, if I say count if, and I'm saying less than 10, I'm counting how many are less than 10. However, the question is asking, is there an item less than 10? It's not asking how many are less than 10, it's asking for a yes or no. So what do I do? If count if G4 till G34, if it's less than 10, so this will get me 5 in this scenario. However, this 5, I have to compare it. Is it greater than or equal to 1? What am I saying? I'm counting how many are less than 10, and I'm checking if it's bigger than 1. This is like I'm asking, do I have at least one item that costs less than 10? Do I have at least one item that costs less than 10? If yes, I'll say yes. The cheapest is min of the range. Otherwise, I'll just say no for now. Let's type enter and we'll see that my answer is correct. I'm getting an error. Oh, this is 43. It wasn't an error, it was more of a warning. And here as well, I want it to be 43, right? Okay, so like the warning, this usually on the upper left, you'd get a green warning, like you noticed when I got the spill, and here I was giving it not enough ranges. Excel is smart enough to tell me, hey, maybe you did something wrong. And they were right, I didn't give it the correct range. But anyway, back to the logic here. I'm counting how many items are less than 10, and then I'm checking if it's at least 1. If I didn't put this, I press enter, it looks like I got the correct answer, but maybe not, right? Because the way that we wrote it here, your condition is simply you're counting how many are 5, how many are less than 10. So this is, again, this is the how many, but no, the question is yes or no. So I count how many and I check if it's at least 1. That's the correct way of doing it. Because then maybe the question would have changed, hey, do you have at least 5 items that cost less than 10? Then this would have quickly changed to greater than or equal to 5. This would check if I have at least 5 items, and yes, I do. Do I have at least 8 items that cost less than 10? No. Do you see what I'm saying here? So this is very important to check here if it's bigger than 1. Okay. So if you didn't, really what's happening, you're counting and you're getting 5. And usually, you remember when I said at the beginning true, right away it's like a condition that's true? The number 5 is similar to true. Really, I think with Excel, any number that you'd write would be considered true, even if it's negative, except maybe for 0. Yeah. Now, I won't dive into the explanation of this too much, but just know that usually Excel would understand any number as true, except for 0 is false. Because again, back to the beginning, I was saying yes or no, true or false, 1 or 0. Usually 1 or any number would be considered true, except for 0, it's considered false. Again, this is why it's very important to compare the COUNTIF with greater than or equal to 1, rather than just leaving it alone. Because if you leave it alone, it's like you're leaving the number 5. Well, what about 5? 5 obviously is true. No, you have to check if 5 is at least 1. Because maybe, again, as before, maybe the question will change. You want to check if at least some number of items is less than 10. Whew, I think we're done here. Like if I wanted to just solve the assignment, like right away tell you the answers, it would not have taken maybe 20 minutes, maybe 15, maybe less. But again, like when we really dive into it and try to explain all the different scenarios, all the different ways we could have solved it, it takes a lot more. And again, I can even solve using a lot different methods so we can understand it a lot more, but that will take even more time. This is good enough for now. You can try to research yourself or try to solve yourself different methods. Like this one, for example. Is there a different way you could have solved this? Okay, I think this is good enough for now, and we'll see you next time.